So, Daniel, first of all, pleasure connecting with you again. It's great to know your background. It's great to know how you are uh, creating this interesting game. So, what kind of experiences have you had till now? What kind of games are you working on? Mm, so, anything which we might know?
Sure. We've been working on a wide. Well, actually, we're working on a platform that you guys might have heard of. It's called Foundry, and it's going to be a large open source project. We're going to be actually opening it up here pretty soon, and we built it on top of Unity. And the idea is to help as many developers, whether it's students, hackers, and indie developers, or studios, or all the way through to the enterprise size space. The idea is to help them build their own custom metaverse or their own custom virtual reality collaboration space or their own custom game or app or experience. Right now, we're kind of more heavily focused on virtual reality than augmented reality, but in theory, the platform can be used for both VR and AR. A couple of different projects that we're working on in that you may or may not have heard of. One is something called BRC VR. It's the official Burning Man virtual reality experience. Burning Man is the the crazy kind of music art festival that happens in the desert in the U.S. Every summer. It's actually coming up here in, I believe, a couple of weeks. And so when COVID, the pandemic happened, they didn't hold the festival, of course, in the desert those years during COVID, and they ended up building virtual reality Burning Man experience, and it was a really cool experience. And I've been to it. It's really cool. It was beautiful. You could see all the different art projects and 360 videos and things like that. And it was actually a really cool experience. And then after the pandemic was over, they were like, "This is really cool. We should keep this, keep it going." And so they did, and then they were building that on a platform called AltSpace, and AltSpace was a kind of really cool metaverse-style platform that allows you to build immersive experiences. And then, as you guys may know, AltSpace got shut down, and so when AltSpace got shut down, they were looking for an alternative platform, and they found us, found Foundry, and so we've been working with them for the last few months, and helping them kind of build a really cool immersive experience for Burning Man that they will completely own. And I think that's the part that sets us and what we're building apart from some of the other platforms, is it allows the studio, the creator, the developer, the company to actually own their own IP.
That's nice. Obviously, we've heard about Burning Man, so I've always wanted to visit there. So I also heard about a small incident that happened over there, but it's always been a dream to go there. So, like in Foundry, how are you doing it? What technology are you utilizing? Is it like just a drag and drop? Does a person need any tech knowledge to use it, or is it? So how does that happen?
Yeah, great question. So no, it's not a drag and drop. It's not really a low code, no code platform. I wouldn't exactly call it a high code platform, but it's definitely geared towards developers and designers who already have a pretty robust knowledge and experience of Unity and particularly immersive development. So right now we built it all on top of Unity. Like, one way to think of it is as a very powerful, very extensive, but SDK layer that sits on top of Unity. So Unity is the game engine that powers a lot of different immersive creations. It also does a lot of mobile games and things like that. And you can even build, AAA regular video games on Unity. But we still have a dependency on something. We have a dependency on Unity, and then we're building Foundry as a foundational immersive layer on top of that. It's built in a very modular approach, and so we can plug in different solutions like Ready Player Me for avatars, or Unity's own multiplayer solution, or Normcore, or Photon. So it doesn't really matter to us what the specific multiplayer solution is for transmitting multiplayer data. We have a modular approach to multiplayer that allows you to kind of plug and play other solutions, but it's all kind of pre-configured for you. And the same thing with our avatar system. It's like the avatar system is very robust. We default to Ready Player Me, but you could theoretically swap in other avatar systems.
So put it in easy words, you are kind of building Zapier for gaming. So the middle layer, the middleware through
I like
which
to think of it
other.
more. I like to think of it more similar to like WordPress actually. So we're building kind of like the WordPress for spatial computing, the WordPress for immersive development. And I think WordPress is actually a really good metaphor because WordPress was a relatively easy tool that obviously massively empowered tons of websites to be built, but it also had full access for developers to do whatever they wanted to do. And even there was like a full open source version of it. And the open source part is critical for us too. We're gonna open source the vast majority of the code to the developer community. And then one more reason why I think the WordPress metaphor is apt here is that we have a marketplace that we're pioneering right now, that we're building with additional third-party developers. So we have we have 3 different companies right now that are building modules or plugins that distribute inside of Foundry, inside of a marketplace. So kind of like how WordPress had a maybe not a marketplace, but WordPress had like a plugin marketplace where you could extend the functionality of WordPress. You kind of had the baseline WordPress version, and then you had all these different plugins that you could add onto that. We're kind of copying the same model essentially.
That's nice. And like, is it only with Unity that you are doing it, or are you also utilizing Unreal? Because like when we are developing games, a lot of our teammates, they've started preferring Unreal Engine, so they'll be going towards Unreal, Blender, as compared to Unity. Especially in the VR space, I think the common viewpoint is that Unreal Engine has better capabilities.
Yeah, I mean, Unreal Engine is amazing, and they've done some really good work lately, particularly around lighting. I think the Unreal Engine is kind of ahead of Unity at this precise moment, specifically in how they handle lighting and particularly around real-time light baking. That being said, the Unity game engine still has the vast majority of the market share, not just in terms of game development, but also in terms of virtual reality game development. And so at the moment, we are exclusively built on top of the Unity game engine, and we'll probably stay that way for a while. It's a possibility that we would re-architect the SDK in such a way that we can also depend on other game engines like Unreal. That's a long ways away. I think for the foreseeable future, for the next couple of years at least, we're just going to stay exclusively focused on Unity.
Okay. And like, what's your opinion? So there are so many blockchain games coming in. So we had this entire XZ Infinity craziness that was there. So are you exploring that space? Have you explored that space? What are your viewpoints on that?
Intellectually, yes. I mean, I think that it's really interesting. Like, blockchain gaming is a really interesting concept from an intellectual perspective. From what we're building at Foundry, no. Like, at the present moment, we've not touched anything related to blockchain gaming. That being said, like, I find it interesting. I did a whole exploration of the different blockchains. This is maybe about 1 year ago or so. I mean, right when kind of blockchain was exploding and everybody was like, oh my God, you got to buy all your NFTs, and Axie Infinity was exploding, etc. I kind of explored a lot of the different games. I played some of the games. I obviously have like a MetaMask wallet, and I actually own a handful of NFTs. Then I own some Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana, etc. And like, I think that it's still very, very early. Like, I have a sneaking suspicion that the blockchain is going to be such a significant factor in the future of the world at large, not just in terms of gaming, but also in terms of global finance. I think blockchain is going to be a really, really, really big deal, but it's still very early right now. And the biggest problem with blockchain games at this percent is that they're not that fun. Like, most of them are just not really that fun. If the whole point of the game is maybe you make some money, like, okay, but is it fun? And the games are not fun.
But I think that will be changing. So again, it's just about integration, how you are integrating blockchain. If right now the entire objective about these blockchain games was just to cash on the fad, so everyone was just trying to build a blockchain game and get users for it. But if the objective is changed, if game developers like yourself or other game developers, game studios, they start building games, then I think blockchain can bring in that addictive factor. Plus, like the reports we saw in Philippines, people earning massive incomes, or they earning day-to-day incomes just through playing Axie Infinity. So I think that can, if that's just a change of objective or the change of vision is required. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I mean, I have a sneaking suspicion that in the future we're going to see a lot of that. We're going to see a lot of really interesting blockchain-based games that come out. People are going to be earning money. I mean, one really interesting statistic is that right now, today, there are more, like right as we're talking right now, there are more people watching other people play video games than there are people watching traditional content. And so, like when you think about like television, movies, etc., like there are more people watching other people play video games than that traditional content. And that's where it's kind of crazy. So I think that video gaming as a whole is on this significant rise. And it's one of those things where if you combine a number of different trends, like video gaming is on the rise, watching people play video games is on the rise, maybe artificial intelligence eventually takes away all of our jobs and the robots do all the jobs and maybe we have more leisure time, then it's not crazy to me that people would be playing and earning money on these video games, these, blockchain based video games. Like that's not that crazy to me at all. And maybe even some of us are just not that good at playing the video games and we watch the other guys play the games. And then like instead of kind of donating money like we do currently with Twitch streamers, you're just like sending them blockchain payments or something like that. Like I could see it happening. I could really see there being really interesting new business models around video games and around, play to earn and things like that. It could be interesting, but I still think it's probably a few years away.
Especially like if we integrate VR into it, if we bring like for VR gaming and blockchain, they generally make a good combination. So where people can go, they can create their avatars, they can sell those avatars, they can earn tokens. So again, that makes kind of an interesting gameplay.
Yeah, exactly. It could be interesting. I'm cautiously optimistic. Honestly, I'm very cautiously optimistic about blockchain as a whole, blockchain gaming, and about even NFTs. I mean, I'm cautiously optimistic. I think that there are use cases that we haven't explored yet. There are use cases that just aren't matured yet, and we'll probably get there. I mean, just as a quick aside, we talked a little bit earlier about me trying to move here to Europe, right now, and it's a big pain in the ass, like dealing with international tax and international laws and accounting between different countries. Like the entire world has not caught up with the reality of doing business globally, right? You guys are a company in India doing work with companies all over the world, the United States, the Middle East, Europe. I'm an American running a company. I'm trying to move to Europe. My employees are in Europe and the United States. My customers are in Europe and the United States. And yet the finance and tax laws have not really caught up with this new reality. And that's where I kind of see blockchain being something that enables more easily a new global reality.
Sounds interesting. And what's your opinion? Like in India, there has been, I don't know whether you've been following it or not, but in India, there has been a huge debate about a tax that is being applied on online gaming. So anything, if people are going and doing in-app purchases, they are playing skill-based games, they will need to pay around a 30% GST or a value-added tax. So have you been following that news?
No, that's interesting though. You're saying that they're trying to add tax onto like in-game purchases in India?
Yeah, so there'll be a 30% tax. So if we are, for example, going and making a purchase of any token within the game, so we'll have to pay a tax on that, especially even for skill-based games. For example, we've got fantasy football games or fantasy cricket games in India. So over there, if you want to add money, so for example, if you are adding $10, so on those $10, you'll have to pay a 30% tax. So you'll be paying $13 to get $10 worth. So government has this sense that it will be helping. They will be able to ensure that people are not exploited, but then the entire gaming industry is up with arms against the government. So
Well, what's so they're saying it's like anti-exploitation, which doesn't really make a ton of sense because like what's the purpose of the tax? What are they actually using the tax for?
So what happened in India and elsewhere is, I guess, a lot of people, a lot of youngsters, they started spending a lot of money on these games, especially skill-based games, which also have an online gambling angle to it, so which can be addictive. So I think they wanted to cut down on that activity. They just do not want children and youngsters around the clock being on PUBG, which I think is a case even in the US. So even I've seen videos of people very worried about youngsters or their kids being and playing PUBG all day round.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, no, I haven't actually heard a lot about this, but that's like fascinating. I think 30% is like way too high unless they're trying to. I mean, it just seems like sometimes it seems to me like I mean, I can understand a little bit with the gambling side of things, but I think when it comes to just normal skill-based gaming and children playing video games, there's a lot of kind of sentiment around this idea that video games are bad and that we should stop people from playing video games. And most of the research either shows that video games are not bad at all, or some of the research even shows that video games are beneficial. Like there was a research study done that found of all of the different types of digital entertainment that children participate in, whether it's watching videos, hanging out on social media, or playing video games, that video games was the one that led to the highest increase in IQ. So they found children over a period of time, and the children that played the most video games were the ones that had their IQ go up the most. And obviously, there's possibly some just correlation between kids that are smart and getting smarter wanting to play video games. But you know, even as a parent myself, I like when my kids, you know, they don't do a ton of digital entertainment every day or every week, but when they do, I generally prefer for them to play video games over watching videos. Like watching videos is very passive. Like if you just simply watch TV or watch cartoons, it's very passive. But when they play video games, they're actually interacting and they're learning and they're trying and they're getting better. And they've shown that there's been additional research that shows that video games help kids to develop behaviors of perseverance and learning how to become to push harder because they learn how to get better in the video game, and then they can translate that to the real world. And so I'm 100% not anti-video game, and I find it so sad, I think, when whether it's parents or governments are so against children playing video games. Of course, there can be a problem if somebody's playing 5 hours of video games every single day, and on the weekend all they do is play video games, and they don't go outside, and they don't exercise, and they don't have friends in real life. Then yeah, that's a problem. Of course, people need to have friends in real life. They need to go outside and play, and they need to exercise. But generally speaking, I think video games are a superior form of entertainment to almost any other form of entertainment.
Again, I think the debate is around that dopamine addiction, how people or how youngsters are getting addicted to it. So eventually, everyone ends up playing for 5 hours a day once they start doing that. So
I know, but let me ask you a different question, which is if a child was studying chess and playing chess 5 hours a day, their parents would be bragging, "Oh, my child plays chess 5 hours a day," and but what's the difference here? Why is it that when their child plays a video game 5 hours a day, suddenly he's a terrible person? Now, again, I think 5 hours is a bit too much, whether it's chess or video games. But it's interesting to me that like one intellectual game chess is so amazing, and another intellectual game, which just happens to be electronic, is suddenly bad.
So I think that's where the generational gap comes in. Maybe our kids won't be facing that problem.
I doubt it. Yeah, I think they'll be totally fine with it. In fact, or maybe at that point in time, it's like how much time you spend completely full dive, with the plug in the back of your head, like the Matrix or something, and then they'll say only 5 hours a day of being like plugged into the Matrix. You have to, unplug and actually go outside and get some sunshine or something like that. But that's funny enough. I think that's part of why I actually really like virtual reality, is because I really like the full immersion of it, and I think that it, at least the way that it exists right now, you can't really do anything else. You can't really check your phone. You can't check emails on the side. The way that VR exists right now, it's a complete digital experience, or you completely unplug. And I think in an ideal world, we would all be completely plugged into the digital experience for a shorter period of time. So right now, we're all kind of casually consuming digital experiences from our phone, from the computer, from the TV, kind of all day long. We wake up, we look at our phone, go to work, we're on the computer, we're done with work, we watch TV or Netflix, and we're kind of casually experiencing digital experiences all day long. And in an absolutely ideal world, I think we would be completely plugged in, 100% immersed for 3 or 4 hours, and then the rest of the day be completely unplugged. No digital. I mean, that's just dreaming. That's going to probably never ever happen. But that would be kind of my dream. I think my ideal life would be to be 100% immersed into the digital experience for 3 or 4 hours a day, and 100% disconnected the rest of the time.
Yeah, just to take your point forward on that, how IQ is being impacted and how more intelligent kids are playing games. So in fact, in India there was a study that children who spend more time even watching Netflix, they have better English conversational skills than other kids, than other children.
Yep.
So I think these digital experiences are definitely impacting. And where do you stand on the entire vision?
They found in the study where they showed video games versus digital, watching things versus social media. They found that the children that engaged the most with social media had no impact on their IQ. Like their IQ didn't go up or down. The children that watched things, they had a slight increase in their IQ, and the children that played video games had a larger increase in their IQ. And so it's like it's not saying. I mean, I think especially watching things can be educational, and it can definitely help you be smarter. And as you're saying, there's also benefits to improving your English skills. Conversely, any language skills actually. So if you wanted to improve your Spanish, to start watching cartoons, TV shows, movies in Spanish, and you'll improve your Spanish, right? So it definitely can help with language acquisition, and as well as it can help because you learn things. And so watching stuff is not terrible. It's not as good as video games, but it's not terrible. Social media is apparently the terrible one.
Yeah. And now with this Vision Pro coming in, so where do you stand on that? How do you think that is going to change the entire ecosystem?
I'm super excited. I don't think that it's going to be. I think it's a really big deal that Apple is getting into the market. And I think that it's going to really help things move in the right direction. In fact, they already have found that investors are now investing more money into virtual and augmented reality startups now that Apple has made the announcement than they were before, which is amazing. And I think that Apple coming into this market is going to be truly helpful. I think this specific device it's better than I thought it was going to be, honestly, based on the announcement and based on the information we have now. But it's still pretty clearly an early device. I think that the Apple Vision Pro 2 or the Apple Vision 3 or something like that is going to probably be the one that is truly amazing and truly the breakthrough. This initial device is going to be really fantastic, particularly for the developer community as well as for the enterprise and the upper end of the market. The fidelity on the headset is basically as good as the most powerful virtual reality headsets that exist on the market right now, made by a European company called Vario. But the Apple is less expensive, actually. So the Vario headset is something in the ballpark of like $5,000 or $6,000. Plus, you have to have an enterprise subscription for it. And a lot of companies use it for things like product design. So like automobile manufacturing companies will do product design of a new version of an automobile with the Vario headset. The Apple Vision Pro headset has the same level of fidelity and probably going to have the same level of like hand tracking and maybe even a far superior experience in many ways at less than half the price. And so if you compare the Apple Vision Pro to the Quest 2 headset, then it's insane, right? It's like 10 times more expensive. But when you compare it to the upper end of the market, it's actually as good or maybe even better than the best current VR headset for half the price.
But still, like at $3,500, don't you think that the headset cost needs to be drastically less for user acquisition to have more and more users coming to this space? So
100%. Yeah. That's where I think that this particular product is going to be very, very useful for the developer community, as well as certain unique enterprise use cases. So I think it's going to be certain enterprise use cases, the developer community, and the very extreme upper end of the consumer market, particularly in the United States. So Android has the global market share of smartphones, but in the United States of America, iPhone is the market leader and has the highest percentage of market share, particularly among the highest income earning people in the United States. And so in the the most wealthy country on planet Earth, arguably the most important economy on planet Earth, and among the highest income earners in that market, Apple has extremely high market share. And so some small percentage them will buy this headset, and so it'll be a really good experience, I think, for the developers to really get their hands on an innovative, powerful headset. And there's two different markets that we can sell, apps to, and you guys as well as developers. There's two different markets that you can play with. One is certain enterprise use cases, and then also the upper end of the American kind of supermarket. Again, we're talking very small numbers, though. That market at this precise moment is really small. But I think that it'll be a good test with people willing to spend money. So if you're a developer shop or a studio and you build something for that market, it's a market that has money in both cases. And so it'll be a good experience for developers to really start testing things out, building things, trying things new. And I'm honestly a lot more excited about Apple's second or third or fourth device, not this particular device. I'm just excited that they're getting into the market and really kind of pushing in a new and exciting direction. I also actually really like one more item on that headset. I really, really, really liked that they kind of rebranded things away from talking about VR, AR to just talking about spatial computing. I think that's a much cleaner thing for people to understand. And then even to the point that they have just a little dial on the head on the actual headset. There's like a little dial that says like, full VR, not full VR, and that's the part that I think a lot of people have been struggling with. Is that the current paradigm is like there's VR, there's AR, and there's MR, and for the average person, like these distinctions are confusing. And it doesn't make sense. And Apple's saying, forget about all these distinctions. It's just spatial, and you can turn up or down how much immersion you want. And that's the real way to think about it, because from a purely technical perspective, it's the big difference is going from 2D to 3D spatial on an XYZ plane than it is anything else. The biggest difference between AR and VR is the degree of immersion, as well as there is the unique aspect in AR that you do need to pay more attention to the real world, because you might have surface plane detection where you're placing objects on a specific surface, or you may want to anchor it to the real world. So let's say in this room I was in, you would use this picture behind me as an anchor, a visual anchor, and say, I'm going to place a portal right here and I don't want it to move. Well, then you can calculate based off of the image above to become essentially an anchor. In VR, you don't care about that as much because you're completely eliminating the real world and you don't care as much. But in AR, you do. But again, the bigger distinction, in my opinion, is that you're in a 3D spatial environment instead of playing a 2D video game.
So we can definitely agree that it is not going to go the Google Glass way. So
No.
It's not going in that way.
No, long term, I do think that the most logical day-to-day use case will be some form of glasses, and they'll be light and easy, kind of like the glasses you're wearing now, and we'll have some sort of display in there. It's just, there's a lot of technical constraints. There's a lot of power constraints right now, like where are you going to put the battery, or where are you going to compute, where are you going to actually process things right now. So that is not, it's not a dream. It's, you know, obviously all of the major companies are working on prototypes and working on building it. But the technology doesn't exist here yet. I mean, I think sometime in the next, who knows, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years, sometime in the next, 10 years or so, we'll probably all wear these glasses. And I do think that the bigger headsets will still exist, absolutely. But it'll be maybe more for entertainment or unique business cases. Just for day-to-day, more people will just use the lightweight glasses.
And then you touched upon lightly on how VR is being used for car manufacturing. So apart from gaming, so for example, here at Idea Show, we are creating an application where VR can be used for open houses. So people, essentially what we are doing is that people can go, they can click pictures. So with the emergence of generative AI, we are able to create 3D walkthroughs just through images of the house. So a person can upload a 2D map and images of the house will have a 3D map created. And through that, we are able to give an open house experience to the person just through VR headset. So what's your opinion on these kinds of application of VR?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love VR gaming. Don't get me wrong. I think it's probably one of the more fun aspects of VR. I think though that there are a good handful of business use cases, and I'll talk about them briefly, and then I'll also talk about what I think is VR's kind of superpower, or the killer app for VR, if you will. But on the business side, we talked a little bit about product design. But more interestingly, I think, is around training. You see a lot of different use cases around virtual reality training and virtual reality education. So there are a lot of companies right now. The U.S. military was actually a big pioneer of this in the beginning for many years now. They've been working and pilots and flight simulators and training and things like that. What used to be a lot more expensive of an array of monitors and sensors for pilot training is now a lot less expensive. They can just put them in a headset. And so there's a lot of different training use cases. They're now coming up with training simulators for both soft skills and hard skills. The soft skill one is actually really quite interesting, and there's another intersection with AI there as well, around having kind of non-playable characters, NPCs, that are trained on language models that can interact with you in a more reasonable way. And so you can test out your skills at becoming a manager, for example, or working with an employee who's being very difficult, for example. So you could have this AI-based employee that's acting very difficult, and you can try to role play how to interact with that difficult employee. So there's training simulators, whether it's hard or soft skills. And there's also sales and marketing, which is really interesting. We worked with the company here in the U.S., actually there in the U.S. because I'm not there right now. But we worked in the U.S. Building out a kind of mini game, a series of mini games that was really fun. that were showcasing the brand attributes of one of their enterprise products, and they took that to a conference and were able to like showcase that at a conference. We worked with a hearing aid manufacturing company that builds kind of like hearing aids for people who have hearing impairment, and we were able to kind of build a simulation of someone styles of hearing aids, whether they had the 360 audio or they only really had front-facing audio. And that's another really interesting use case where you can showcase a product to someone who doesn't have hearing problems by simulation. And so there's the training, there's some sales and marketing use cases, and then I think where it's a little less obvious, but I think a lot more interesting, is around collaboration and around the fact that we're now in this kind of global world. People are living and working all over the world, and yet, yes, Google Meets and Zooms work. Like, we've all been doing it for the last five years now, right? And particularly since the pandemic happened, it's like I think at this point I've had 10 in-person meetings in the last 4 years, right? And every single other meeting is on the computer like this, and it obviously works. Like, we've been doing it no problem, but it's a lot more engaging and a lot more interesting when you meet in person. And so I think VR really is going to have this, occupy this new niche around having important meetings and around building rapport for global employees. And that's where I get to. I think VR's kind of killer app, which is, again, it's not fully realized yet, partly because the headsets are big and heavy and not everybody has them. But it's really fun to play a VR game like Half-Life Alyx or Boneworks or Bone Lab, or something that really embraces the technology, where you're grabbing things, shooting guns and climbing walls and things like that. That's all really amazing. You're like, wow, this is so cool. But you play the game for a few hours, you put it down, that's that. What often has people coming back to VR is the collaboration, the social aspect, hanging out with other people in VR. It's not the same when you're hanging out with people in a 2D environment like we're in right now. It's so much different when you're hanging out with people in 3D, where I can hear somebody on the left, I can hear somebody on the right, I can turn around, I can say, let's go over here, and we go over there. And that's such an exciting, fun, awesome experience. You see it a lot with heavy VR users. When you look at the community of like really heavy users around VR, almost exclusively they're hanging out in VR chat all the time. And they're hanging out in these social collaborative spaces that they've built together with their friends. And I think both on the consumer side as well as on the business side, we have barely begun to scratch the surface of the social, the community, the collaborative, and in an increasingly global world, I think it's going to be more and more important as we begin to kind of embrace these things.
Yeah, especially when we are working with a startup here in India. So till now, internet has been democratizing education, but that has not been the case with engineering education. So what they are doing is that we've got these big colleges, nice colleges, but everyone cannot have access to those education institutes. And a big part of engineering knowledge education is experimentation, that lab work. So they are trying to build those lab works through VR experiences, and we are helping them in this process. So what we've done is that we've built out studios. So again, because of the accessibility of these headsets, so we've built studios. Children can come to those studios, kids can come to those studios, and then they can have that engineering, they can have experience the live practical environment of a lab. So that's a very interesting use case.
I think education is going to be, I think it's going to be crazy. Like, between the internet and AI and VR and AR, I think education of our children, maybe not my kids are 5 and 7. They'll probably see it towards the end of their academic careers. But like, I think my grandchildren, as an example, their educational experience, let's say 20 or 30 years from now, is just going to be unbelievable to us right now. Like, we can't even possibly imagine what a child's educational experiences is going to be like 20 or 30 years from now. You combine all these technologies.
Much earlier than 30 years. So I'll disagree with you over there. So I think it can be earlier than 30 years. Like in the next 15 years, I see some many crazy things happening in this field. So
I hope you're right. I mean, I love this idea, and I think it's going to be, potentially sooner than we think, but it's also, you never know. Like if it takes a little while for all of the different technologies to mature, and also it's not just the technology. Like we almost have all of the technology today. Like we almost have all of it today, but then you also have to deal with
yeah.
governments and bureaucracies and behavior change of human beings, and like people just keep
Mm,
sending their kids to school, and the school has to like adjust as well. Like the government has to
mm,
adjust. But I definitely agree with you. It's like 30 years for sure. It's going to be crazy. 30 years from now, it's going to be absolutely crazy. 15 years from now, it could. There's like a high probability it's going to be absolutely crazy. And then every year, less than 15 years from now, the
mm.
probability of it being just insane decreases. But theoretically, there's I would say, small 5 or 10% probability, but there's a probability that even like 5 years from now, global education is completely and utterly transformed. Like it's possible.
Yeah. Hopefully, our client will be able to do that here in India and maybe elsewhere.
Yeah, it'd be really
So,
exciting. I think there's a
great. And
this is going back to the blockchain. There's a number of companies that are working on proof and using the blockchain as proof that a child actually did complete their education. So you can imagine this AI powered, virtual reality powered, like educational experience for children, but with a proof of record of it on the blockchain, so that a child in India can say, I did learn all these things. I have proof on the blockchain, and now you can hire me as an American company can hire me, and I have proof that I know all these things. And so it's going to get interesting, I think.
especially with AI. So even in that architecture example I was giving, in where you can just click pictures and create a 3D walkthrough. So I think with AI and VR, that's a great marriage to happen.
Yep.
So especially with generative AI that is coming in,
Yeah, it's going to be amazing.
and our conversation will be incomplete if we do not talk about Meta. So any thoughts
I
about that?
yeah, I think that generally speaking,
Mm,
I appreciate greatly everything that they're doing. I don't
mm,
know if they always are. No, I mean, I know for sure they're not always making the right decisions, right? They make mistakes. I think that I'm not even sure renaming the company Meta was a smart choice at all. I think that Mark Zuckerberg went pretty heavy on like metaverse, metaverse, metaverse,
mm,
metaverse, even though he did say to people like it's still very early, we're working on it, it's going to be a while.
mm,
People didn't understand that. They thought that he was in that moment with the Quest 2 selling the metaverse, and then it didn't really hold up.
mm,
So I find it fascinating, but their headset, the Quest 2 headset, is spectacular. The Quest Pro headset is good. I think it was kind of not as it was not. I own one. It's actually a really solid headset, and I prefer it over my Quest 2. I've now given away my Quest 2 headset actually. The
mm,
Quest Pro headset's great, but I don't think it was a commercial success. It was too expensive, and it wasn't really clear who exactly they were gearing it towards. I think some of us that were developers that could afford it liked it a lot, but otherwise it wasn't really a very commercially successful headset. I think the Quest 3 is going to be great, Quest 4, Quest 5, etc. I think that they've done really, really good things, and they've put billions of dollars into the entire ecosystem. Now, I'm
mm,
actually very excited about the competition. So if you look at, Apple, Meta, HTC, Pico, and there's rumors that Valve is going to be releasing another headset, like a Valve Index 2, or maybe something completely different that we don't even know. And so all of this competition just helps everybody get better and better, and improves the experience on the hardware side, at least for all of us. From the pure software side, I think this is where Meta is maybe not doing as good of a job as they could. Like the Oculus
mm,
experience for getting getting your product on the like if you're a developer and you build an app and you try to get it onto the Oculus store, it's a really hard process. It's very, very difficult, and that's kind of crazy. Like that's kind of crazy. Like I know guys who've been working on their application now, and it's a successful application, but working on their application for a long time, and they're still not on the Quest store. It's like, why? You know, like why? Like if you think about Android and Apple, it's not as hard. It's not anywhere near. Even Apple is a lot more selective with what gets into the Apple store, but they're still a lot easier to get an application listed on the Apple store than it is to get an application listed in the Quest store, and that's crazy. And then and so. And from a purely tooling perspective, like what they have like SDKs and things, they are powerful, they are good, but then you're stuck completely in the Quest. And with Unity, we can build for all platforms, like we can build for all headsets. And so I'm a much firmer believer in universal standards and universal tools that allow people to build not just for one headset, but for build for all of the headsets. And like I get it, you might take advantage of unique features of a headset if they exist, but I don't think that we should be building exclusively for one headset, targeting one headset. So I think again, I'm very grateful to Meta and Mark Zuckerberg for the amount of investment they put in. The headset is amazing. I think the Quest, even today, right now, if someone was like, what headset should I buy? I would say, go buy a Quest 2. Don't buy one new because the Quest 3 is going to come out soon. Go buy a used Quest 2 right now, is what I would suggest people to do. But, I think there's some improvements for them to make. Meta Horizon Worlds kind of sucks, and I think they could do a lot better. It's not that good of an experience for developers, content creators, or for the users. It could be a lot better. And it's surprising that it's not better. But then again, that makes it easier for me with Foundry, right? Then I can go build something like Foundry, and hopefully developers and creators can embrace what we're building.
Hopefully. Let's wait for Ellen to get into it, huh?
We'll see what happens. We'll see.
Great, Daniel. It has been a nice session. I see that we've reached towards the end of the session. So, any pleasure talking to you. Any
absolute pleasure. Thank you. Yeah, it was great talking. Happy to chat anytime. Really great conversation, and enjoyed it.
Great, Daniel. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll be having more such conversations. Hopefully we'll be seeing more Foundry developers coming in, and maybe our team will also be developing on Foundry very soon.
Yeah, just on that note, Foundry, the vast majority of the code base is going to be free and open source. So we would encourage you guys to use it with your client projects, regardless of whether you ever pay for anything. The idea is for it to just be a really solid, open way for you guys to build client projects or build your own internal projects. And so the more developers that use it, the better it is.
Definitely. So at Idea Show, we always trying out new technologies. And we've been working in AI, we've been working in blockchain, VR. So I think with more and more platforms coming like yours, it is exciting times ahead.
Absolutely. Thanks again so much. Happy to chat anytime. All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good night.